If the lift is non-responsive or sticking, you can attempt to hit the motor solenoid lightly with a heavy object under the engine bay to see if it will unstick. You can check that the LED blocks on the solenoid are lighting up correctly. If not, unscrew them and check the filaments aren't blown inside. It's important to check the beacon cabling, as this can short out the circuit if any breaks are in the cable and touching the metal housing. Your battery is a key indicator to whether the lift is operating, so test this for good health and good charge, and replace if needed. To ensure a good connection between the battery and the terminals, you can sand the terminals lightly and check for any loose connections. Remove the front paneling of the key switch by unscrewing the 4 screws. Check behind for any broken cables or loose water that can be dried. If there are fuses behind here, make sure they are intact and not blown, and if so, replace as necessary. Check for any broken cables under the engine hood. These are a leading contributor to loss of lift power. Check the 2-pronged fuse on the battery to see if this is intact and has blown, and replace as necessary. There are also mega fuses around the battery, 125 or 150 ampage. Check these with a multimeter on a continuity setting, placing the negative and positive prongs either side to check for a beeping connection. If your lift isn't working, it might mean that your tow vehicle is not providing a sufficient charge. To test this, set your multimeter to 20 volts, place the negative and positive prongs onto the corresponding terminals on the battery, and you should see a static charge of 12.5 to 13-ish volts. Once you turn the ignition on the tow vehicle, this should start to increase, and this should be set somewhere around 13.5 volts. The electrical cable pins should all be the same height. If any have dropped, use a pair of pliers to pull them out. Also check that the internal structure of the cable is sufficient. Using a multimeter on the continuity setting, hold your negative prong onto one pin on one end of the cable, and using your positive prong, tap the corresponding one on the other end. It should beep with a good connection. Then, keeping the negative in the same place, tap the other pins with your positive. If you get a beep from another pin, it means there is likely a short or break in the cable. To see if the motor on the hydraulic lift is receiving any power, first put your multimeter onto a voltage setting, then place the negative prong onto the negative terminal of the motor and the positive prong on the positive live setting on the solenoid. Press the lift button up, and if you see a 0 voltage, it likely means the solenoid is not receiving power, and this needs to be changed. To check that the battery is supplying sufficient voltage to the hydraulic lift motor, set your multimeter to voltage, 20 volts, and place your negative probe on the negative terminal of the hydraulic motor and your positive onto the solenoid, and you should see a static charge of 12 volts. Then, to check to see what cable might be broken between the battery and the motor, place the negative probe of the multimeter onto the live terminal of the solenoid and the positive probe onto the negative battery terminal, and you should see a voltage. Then do the negative probe onto the negative terminal of the hydraulic lift and the positive probe onto the positive terminal of the battery, and you should see a voltage. It's possible the lift isn't responding due to faulty buttons. You can take the front of the key switch off and press the up and down button to check the coloured blocks are responding. If not, there may be broken or loose cables, or the block behind the buttons may need replacing. This can be released with a metallic switch at the back, lifted off and cleaned, or replaced entirely. There may be excess water behind here as well, which could cause corrosions and breaks, so dry this accordingly.